today, even with the new banks and with the neons of Brazil, like the new digital banks, still 30% of the adult population in Brazil don't have a credit card. That's why when we launched Pagaleve, the fit was so great and the amount of people that started using Pagaleve was very, very big. Pagaleve's decision engine is one of the most sophisticated and creative in Brazil and potentially in the world. The AI, the machine learning that we have, will learn all the micro patterns and it will apply that into the decision-making process. That results in an approval process that's really effective. One interesting thing is that it's faster and it's simpler to buy with Pagaleve online than it is to buy with a credit card online. We are the biggest buy now pay later company in Brazil in terms of acceptance, in terms of amount of retailers that offer our solution. The speed that we are growing is intense. It's an 8x versus March. One interesting thing is that we have also reached positive EBITDA for the first time in December. Not only growing a lot on volume, but also growing a lot in profitability. The vision for Pagaleve is to become synonym of installments for all of the Brazilians. Whenever they think on installments, immediately they think about Pagaleve.
Welcome to the very first episode of Emerging Fintech, your weekly guide to financial technology innovation in emerging markets. I'm Tony, and after spending 3 years working in financial ecosystems in the US and Latin America, I noticed something striking. The most groundbreaking financial innovations aren't happening in Silicon Valley or London. They are emerging from Lagos, Sao Paulo, Jakarta, and Bangalore. So why another podcast? Because while countless shows cover Western fintech, almost no one connects the dots between the unique innovations happening across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. These regions aren't just adopting Western financial models. They are leapfrogging them entirely. It is solutions for challenges that the developed market never had to solve. Through conversations with entrepreneurs, corporate innovators, regulators, investors, and industry experts, we will explore how technology is transforming financial services in these dynamic economies. We will examine how mobile money revolutionized Kenya before Apple Pay exists, how Brazil's instant payment system Pix processed over 2 billion transactions per month while the US was still debating faster payments, and how Indian UPI create the world's most advanced real-time payment infrastructure. These aren't just interesting case studies. They are blueprints for the future of global finance. What works in these challenging environments often contain lessons for financial services everywhere. Today, we are thrilled to welcome Henrique Weaver, founder and CEO of Pagaleve, Brazilian fintech pioneer buy now pay later services via Brazil's instant payment system Pix. Henrique brings a wealth of experience from his time at global companies like Uber, YoY, and McKinsey. We'll dive in how Pagaleve is revolutionizing credit access in Brazil, the impact of payment innovation on financial inclusion, and the future of fintech in emerging markets. So whether you're a fintech founder, financial services professional, policymaker, technology enthusiast, or simply curious about the future of finance beyond traditional markets, this podcast is for you. Let's begin our exploration of the most dynamic and underreported financial ecosystem in the world. Hi, Henrique. Welcome to Emerging Fintech Podcast. It's an honor to have you as our inaugural guest. Excited to hear your story.
Thanks, Tony, for having me here.
Henrique, before we dive into Pagaleve, I would love to understand your background. Could you walk us through your educational and professional journey before founding the company? What experiences shaped your path to fintech entrepreneurship?
Yeah, sure. So I was born and raised on the countryside of São Paulo. I studied business administration at the University of Brasilia. And then after that, my first position after university was at the Coca-Cola company, where I spent around 5 years. I worked in operations and marketing, lived in many different cities across Brazil. Then I did my MBA at UCLA in Los Angeles. And then after that, I joined McKinsey as a strategy consultant. I spent 4 years at McKinsey. Then I was invited to lead Uber for a part of Brazil. 3 years later, partner at McKinsey, who I knew well from my consulting times and who was very close to SoftBank, he referred me to YoY, the Indian hotels company, to launch and grow YoY in Brazil. So I joined as a CEO for Brazil at YoY. And then after that, I was fortunate to meet my career, who is my partner at Pagaleve and also the co-founder of the business.
Thank you so much for walking us through your career. From all these experiences, which one do you think was most crucial in preparing you to build Pagaleve?
I mean, all of them, if I look back, I think all of them had a clear importance, right, for my path to become founder and CEO of a company like Pagaleve. There's this famous commencement speech from Steve Jobs in which he says that when you are doing what you're doing, you don't actually perceive this, but when you look back, you actually connect the dots. For me, it was very clear that effect. So, for example, I did consulting for McKinsey. That was very important for me to reinforce my analytical skills and learn about the dynamics and the dilemmas of the CEO of any given company for multiple sectors. So I've done projects very diverse, from coal mining for a company in the desert of Australia, all the way to projects such as strategic due diligences, right? DDs for companies wanting to buy other companies. So that was important. At Coca-Cola, I think I had like a very good lesson on how great marketing can influence a lot and how perception can be shaped and how you can have like this excellence in communications, right? At Oyo, I think it was important to understand this balance, the balance kind of between growing and being profitable, right? I mean, strong growth is essential, right? At any given scenario, you need to have strong growth, but the profitability side is also a tricky component that needs to be always assessed and reassessed again and again. So that was I think also I get from Oyo. And for Uber, also I think a very, very important at times, I think a lot of important lessons, mostly around, I think one of the biggest ones were around values, right? I mean, at least Uber in Brazil was a very good examples on how values can shape great results. So it was an amazing culture. The cultural values were really lived on a day-to-day basis. For example, one of the core values for Uber was called big bold bets, right? And then it basically meant that you can test and you can do MVPs, but the ambition needs to be really, really big, and you need to focus on a small amount of very bold initiatives so that you can succeed. That type of mentality for me, it was also important now at my time at Pagaleve.
That's very interesting. Have you been intentional in the companies that you are going to work for? And if so, what did you want to learn from each company that actually you validate that you did, or you were actually surprised that you learned?
I think it has been mostly intentional. On the beginning, for example, on my first job at Coca-Cola, I got in as a trainee, a kind of rotational trainee program. And I know when I was still in university, I knew I wanted to be a trainee in a big company, right? So I enrolled at a lot of different processes, and then I passed in the one that I wanted most, which was Coca-Cola. Then I knew after some time that I wanted to do an MBA in the US and then work in a consulting firm. And then I was fortunate to be accepted at McKinsey. Those steps were very planned. And then from then onwards, after McKinsey, it was more opportunistic, right? So I got offers that were really, really appealing to me, like working Uber, launching many different cities in Brazil, launch Oyo in Brazil. Those were opportunistic. I didn't plan that because then it made all the sense in the world for me back then in those specific moments.
Yeah, I would love to kind of like zoom in into your career in Uber, because being in Uber at that inflection point, it will give you kind of like the sense of how a hyper growth company has this sort of mindset and values that you mentioned before. And if I am correct, Sao Paulo is one of the most important cities for Uber globally. So can you elaborate more about what sort of strategies did you build in your time at Uber that it was important for success in the company?
Yeah, sure. So in the beginning of Uber, like in the US, Brazil was sort of this cross in the map. So the story is that the original intention was not to launch Uber in Brazil, as it was a developing country with high crime rates, bureaucracy, etc. So for some reason, somebody got to convince Travis Kalanick to launch in Brazil. And so fast forward a few years, and Brazil becomes the biggest country in the world for Uber in number of rides. It's like a true money machine. When I joined Uber, some years later, the company was already operating in a couple of cities here in Brazil. A big part of my mission there was to expand operations to several additional places, right, in Brazil. So, and then of course, at the same time, making the business in the cities that we were already launched healthier and stronger, right? I mean, A couple of things about the operation. I think one is what I've mentioned before on the culture of Uber. It's a really strong culture, and the performance assessment for every employee is done based on the cultural norms, which is pretty interesting, right? That was a very interesting experience for me. And when I led YoY and then Pagaleve, I made sure to try to mimic a bit of that. On first, spending energy on setting what are the big values, like what are the main values that we want, and then leaving the values, right? Like hiring people that share the same view and doing performance appraisals according also to those values. I think that was a big one. And then there was also an important point on recruiting overall. I mean, on investing disproportionate amount of time and energy on making sure that we find, the best candidates possible in the country for the job. And then at the same time that you are very ambitious with the caliber of people that you try and attract to your company. That's inspired me a lot. When I launched Pagaleve, I was asking people to join Pagaleve, and my feeling was that those people are already very well placed in enormous companies, and how I'm going to convince those people to join a company that not even exists yet, right? So they were already rock stars on those companies, in great companies, and in most of the cases, the people, they came to Pagaleve and they're still here with us building this great business, right? So I think those are some of the points that in Uber, I think it was important to me, and that I still bring to my day-to-day at Pagaleve.
Yeah, amazing values that you actually have established not only in these high-growing companies, but also in Pagaleve. But let's talk about Brazil and its payment context. Brazil has a unique payment culture with installment payments deeply embedded in consumer behavior. How this cultural context influence your thinking when founding Pagaleve?
That context, Tony, was important, and actually it did influence my decision to create Pagaleve alongside with Mike. So when we started to analyze the market, we looked and we observed that Brazilians were very used for paying for pretty much anything in installments, right? It was a cultural thing. But up until 2020-ish, the only true scalable way for people to pay in installments was by using a credit card. That meant that if you stepped in a shopping mall, or if you entered any e-commerce platform, like a website in Brazil, and if you did not have a credit card in your hands, you were not going to be able to pay in installments in 99% of the purchase situations, right? There were, apart from credit cards, there were what we call crediários, which are old school type of installments. They are still around today. They have electronic versions, but they have two very big downsides. One is that they approve a little. They approve between 15 and 20% of the requests, which is nothing. Retailers don't like that. That's why it has never been expanded to the mass of retail. So that's one. And the second one is that it's very friction-full. So you need to fill in several forms. You need to take a selfie of yourself. So it's an overall bad experience. And the only people that use that is people that really, really need the installments, really need the credit very hard. So it's very skewed to people with a low credit profile, right? So at the end of the day, there was no seamless, scalable installment solutions apart from credit cards. So that was what became so evident for us that there was a huge space in the market for us to create something to be an alternative to that.
That's interesting. Would you say that was a specific aha moment when you realized you need to build Pagaleve, or there was a couple of aha moments that actually helped you to build conviction?
It was not just one, but I think we had a hypothesis. Right, we had a hypothesis that this could be huge. And when we started to dive and dig deeper, that hypothesis got reinforced. So it was not just once. So the hypothesis was there since the beginning. And then some things gave more evidence that this was big. I mentioned about credit cards, right? And there were three groups of people, like three big groups of people that were underserved by the current dynamics of paying installments only through a credit card. The first underserved group, Tony, was people that didn't have a credit card. Today, even with the new banks and with the neons of Brazil, like the new digital banks, still 30% of the adult population in Brazil don't have a credit card. 30%, it's a lot of people. Second underserved group is people that have a credit card, but have a purchasing power higher than the credit limit that the card gives them. So they have a card, they have a purchasing power, but they cannot suspended by installments because they reach the ceiling of the limit, right? And the third underserved group is all people that just don't like using a credit card. They might have a credit card, but they would prefer not to do that. For example, Generation Z is a very good example. I mean, several sub-profiles in Generation Z just prefers not to use a credit card if they have other options. So those three groups comprise like tens of millions of people in Brazil that are underserved. That's why when we launched Pagaleve, the fit was so great, and the amount of people that started using Pagaleve was very, very big. But that was the point. So not a aha moment. It was a hypothesis that we had in the beginning. That was really, really proven correct as we studied the market.
So when you had these insights, what was the first concrete step that you took to validate it?
It was pretty much research, right? I mean, we researched a lot. We talked to a lot of credit and market experts to understand their views on specific aspects. So I've had good experience on this more strategic planning side from my time at McKinsey. So the way to find information, consume information, track and recheck with people, that was, I mean, a process that I used to do very, very often and that I have perfected over the years in my previous experiences. So the process to understand the opportunity was very systematic. One thing that also helped to gain confidence was to have people that done similar things in different geographies. My co-founder, Mike Weaver, he was the founding CTO for Zip. Now, Zip is one of the biggest buy now pay later companies in the world. It was created in Australia. Now it operates in the US and in several other countries. In the initial group of investors for Pagaleve, they were also investors in other buy now pay laters around the world, and they knew the sector very well. Not in Brazil, in other countries, but they had a lot to add on this exploration we did to understand the opportunity in Brazil.
You have mentioned about the founding team, and it seems like it's very diverse. How do you bring this team together, and what specific skills or qualities were you looking for in your co-founders? I know you mentioned about your co-founder having a previous experience with Zip, the Australian buy now pay later that is a public company. What else do they bring to the table and complement you in this founding team?
Yeah, so since the beginning of Pagaleve, Tony, even before we started operating, my drive and Mike's drive was to bring really top talent to work with us, but to have people that are much better than us in their fields of expertise. And even that seemed as a stretch in that point in time, as the operation was tiny in the beginning. For the first few offer letters that we've sent, they were sent from my Hotmail account, just for you to have an idea. But the ambition was there to find top talent in each area of expertise. So, I mean, the key to have those initial set of people on board was to show our views and vision of the future. The opportunity that we saw on the future, what we could build together and how we were seeing the business developing on the years to come. But I mean, it was key to not to hire people that would be just enough for the next 1 year, but someone that could be enough for the next 5-10 years, right? So someone much more prepared than what might seem necessary for the very beginning of the operation, right? So that was a shift in paradigm from what I think some companies that I saw that were in similar stages were doing, and definitely I think that paid off. I think that was very important to get us to where we are in such a short amount of time.
And how has your founding team dynamic evolved as the company have grown?
I mean, we got much more mature in terms of processes. Now the team is 140 people. It's still a small-ish team if you compare to bigger companies. But one thing that we start to be forced to do is to create new processes so that just things flow in a nicer way. In the very beginning, it's easier, right? We just have a WhatsApp group with everybody, and then everybody talks with everybody. It's easy. Now we need to have a little bit more like specific forums and discussion dynamics. And we have a bunch, right? So we have, for example, in terms of leadership, we have every 6 months, we have a leadership planning offsite in which we spend 3 days locked in a hotel room just planning. We have our monthly reviews meeting and this and that. So that got evolved a lot to make sure that we didn't lose ourselves in bureaucracy and too many processes, but that we also were productive. I mean, right? Productivity is the name of the game, right? And we want to make sure that we can be effective and that we don't get lost in a process that is too messy, right? In a situation that's too messy. But I think we got a good balance of process and agility. And I think one layer that I mentioned before, which is important for that to happen, is culture, right? I mean, culture is everything. I mean, it helps for us not to need too many additional processes, right?
From these cultural and values that you have learned across your career, can you describe further what are the Pagaleve's cultural values that all the employees need to align with?
Of course. So the biggest, most important value for Pagaleve is on collaboration. We foster and we are collaborative when we foster collaboration, right? I think this is I think one of the biggest ones, and this is very evident when you talk to anyone at Pagaleve. I think. Second one is called dress up as yourself. Like vista-se de você in Portuguese, which means that you not only need to be yourself, but you have the responsibility to creating an environment in which other people can be their best version of themselves. Third one is on which we call being light is a lot of work. I'm just translating because it's Portuguese, meaning Pagaleve, leve means light, right? So pretty much says being light requires you to put a lot of energy, right? So it means that this is a value about putting your whole self to work in the work, right? And make sure that you put all your energy and that you have a lot of energy and that you are in a phase of your life that you want to dedicate a great amount of energy to the company, right? The next one and the last one is on we think big, right? So we don't want to build Pagaleve for the next 6 months or 1 year. So we want to be a company thinking on how it will look 100 times bigger than it is today. So those are kind of the 5 cultural norms for Pagaleve, which we follow very, very closely. Sorry, there's one more. The other one is responsibility for the whole, right? Responsibility for the whole, meaning that you need to understand about other areas of Pagaleve. So you need to understand how the engines connect to one another, and you need to be responsible not only for the results for your area, but also for the results of other areas. So that's the last one, which is also very important.
I'm very intrigued by the first Pagaleve pitch, not only to investors, but especially to employees. You mentioned that these early employees, the founding team, were working at amazing companies with outrageous salaries, and you were trying to convince them to quit their job and join a new startup. Could you explain us more what was the initial pitch to them? Like, could you explain us more about Pagaleve? What is Pagaleve? What is the business model, and how it differs from traditional buy now pay later offers?
Yeah, for sure. So the pitch, and I mean the way that I still describe Pagaleve today, and it was the same as in the beginning, is that is what I've mentioned about credit cards being pretty much the only way, scalable way for people to buy installments, and the fact that there were those 3 big groups of people that were underserved, like tens of millions of people underserved. We developed a technology and a platform and processes that were very ahead of what other companies are doing. I mean, in combination. I mean, there was no other company, no other bank or fintech that was doing everything that we're doing in such an advanced way. So there are pretty much 4 points of competitive advantage that we have today. And this is part of the way that when we describe Pagaleve to new employees, we make sure that we underscore those points. So first one is on our commercial and B2B capabilities, right? So we know the B2B needs very well, and we connect very well to the needs of the retailers, which are our main partners, right? So from the dashboard that they use to the language that they speak, I think that the capabilities are there, very, very strong. We've hired a very senior, a very experienced commercial and operations team, which help to ensure that we get on the forefront of those capabilities. Second point is on our underwriting and credit capabilities. So we have this state-of-the-art credit engine, which I can talk more in a bit. And we have a combination of approval rate and delinquency rate that nobody else in Brazil has, not even close. We won a couple of awards. For example, one as the most innovative credit initiative in Brazil. And all the companies competing with us were companies that have 10, 20 years of experience. We won that when we were 2 years in operation only, right? So that's the second thing. The third thing is on the consumer side, on the consumer stickiness. So we are a consumer-facing brand, and we are already creating a lot of habit of consumption with us. So people already have a great deal of habit. Repurchase rates are growing more and more. And that's also very hard to catch up for any newcomer. And the fourth one is in technology. We have a state-of-the-art platform, all built into microservices, very, very scalable, and it helps us to grow even faster. So those are the kind of the 4 points that are very hard for a newcomer to bring and to do, even if you consider existing companies like banks, for example.
Buy now, pay later models has been for a while before coming to Brazil. What aspects of these global models did you deliberately choose not to replicate in Brazil, especially that your co-founder has buy now, pay later experience?
Buy now, pay later in Brazil, by sort of buy now, pay later was already here, right? I mean, the checks in installments, like checks predatados, as we used to call, that doesn't exist anymore. It were there. Then credit cards came. Now companies like Pagaleve. So there's a big difference from the dynamics for other countries, such as the US, Europe, Australia, because for those countries, paying in installment is something new. Like it's less than 10 years old. So it was launched in the last few years. So I mean, the main difference is that if I compare buy now pay later in Brazil from other countries, is that right? It's something that has been around, right? So the habit was already there, but there were still huge opportunities, right? So it's harder, in my opinion, to do this in a country where the habit is already there, mainly because there are already a lot of players that address that in a sense. The flip side is that they were not doing it in the best way possible. So the opportunity to harvest a lot from having a superior product, a superior business model is clear, right? And the second difference from buy now pay later in Brazil and in other countries is the advent of Pix. Pix was launched 4 years ago. It's huge, and we sort of surfed the Pix wave, and that made a difference. Like the unit economics are more attractive when you compare that of other international players. It's safer, so it also adds a additional advantage for operating buy now pay later in Brazil versus in other countries.
Now that you mentioned Pix, what were the biggest technical and operational challenge in building on Pix versus other models or other ways to actually do the same thing on Pagaleve?
I don't think there were any huge operational constraints on building on top of Pix rails. Pix is a very pro-market, very simple and modern platform. So that was not a big concern. I mean, that was not a big problem. I think it has been very good and very effective to work using the Pix rails.
One of your most innovative approaches, as you mentioned before, is assessing risk based on what people are buying rather than who they are. So how did you develop this insight, and why do you think it was overlooked by traditional credit providers?
Yeah, good question. So Pagaleve's decision engine is one of the most sophisticated and creative in Brazil and potentially in the world. The underwriting process that we do considers more than 100 variables, right? From going from the SKU that's being purchased, the consumer, the moment of purchase, the retailer, the device, etc. So we are really, really ahead of any other underwriting mechanism in Brazil for the type of transaction that we do, right? So we are able to get SKU level data in real time, right? Because we are connected to the checkouts of the retailers, right? So the fact that we are in the retailers makes the SKU information available, and that makes all of the difference, right? So we know that if I change the item being purchased, even if I'm analyzing the same purchase, the same person buying, if I just change the item being purchased, the odds of that person paying us back changes, right? And we don't need to tell the algorithm that the odds change. The AI, the machine learning that we have, will learn all the micro patterns, and it will apply that into the decision-making process, right? And that results in an approval process that's really effective. Our approval rates is on the ballpark of 70%. And we have also very, very low delinquency, right? So that level of approval rate is very important for retailers too, and are one of the important aspects that retailers like about us. It's a transaction by transaction basis type of approval, considering the SKU information and many other information. So it's much more advanced than anything we have seen here around.
You mentioned about delinquency rate being low, as low as less than 2% compared to credit cards delinquency rates of 50 on due date. What key factors have you enabled you to achieve this?
Yeah, I think this is along the same lines that what I have described about the engine. I mean, key aspects are, one, the amount and the variety of information that we are able to get in real time. Two, the depth and the sophistication of our decision engine. And three, I think the product characteristics that goes hand in hand with the underwriting process. And Tony, this last point on the product characteristics, this is very important, right? Because one aspect of this is regarding how seamless our purchasing process is. One interesting thing is that it's faster and it's simpler to buy with Pagaleve online than it is to buy with a credit card online. So it's faster to buy with Pagaleve than with a credit card. And that's game changer. That makes us get even consumers that don't need to pay in installments, they buy with us. And that's just because our payment process is easier, it's simpler, it's everywhere, right? I mean, it's a good selection of stores. It gets you recommendations on other cool things to buy. And that profile, that specific profile of premium consumers or people that don't need to actually pay in installments, this helps a lot to balance out our risk, right? And this makes, at the end of the day, our portfolio much healthier from a delinquency perspective.
So all this information that you have from the checkout systems and the data points that you mentioned before, how did this help you to predict repayment behavior from your consumers?
Yeah, this is pretty much a statistical analysis based on past data points. So what the algorithms does is to look at past performance, past behavior, and cross-check that with a big amount of additional information, right? So for example, if you're wearing a green polo shirt, if the algorithm for some reason understands that people buying green polo shirts have a higher delinquency rate, and it could be the higher delinquency rate than other specific products, that will be considered in the decision engine and taken into account. But it's not only that. So that's one of the 100 variables. So if you do this in a mass of transactions, you can actually be really, really good at understanding what specific factors will contribute or not to the person paying us back. Let me give you an example. Let's suppose we are analyzing a person, the very same person, making a purchase of 1,000 reais, right? And in purchase A, this person is buying a cell phone of 1,000 reais. And purchase B, the person is buying a high-end jeans of 1,000 reais, right? So this same transaction being done by the very same person, the very same day of the month, have different delinquency profiles when I vary the item being purchased, the store being purchased, or anything else, right? So same amount, same person, very different delinquency profiles. And that one, this example, I don't even need the credit engine to tell me that, because if you ask this to any credit director or any risk professional, they're going to confirm that. But this is a huge difference. But the tiny variations, it's impossible for a human to understand that in real time and apply that into the decision-making process. And so the engine, having AI leading the process, is game-changing. It makes all the difference in the world, right? So that's why it's so important to have the SKU level data and all the other data that we analyze.
Talking about AI, how these models have perfect or improve what you guys have built.
So we were fortunate to have Mike in the team, of course, like as a co-founder, because Mike has a technology background and has always been very bullish on AIs before AI was cool. So we have put together a machine learning and AI team since the beginning, like a 5-person team. And that was very important. So on the beginning, the AI team was pretty much focused on the credit engine, on the risk assessment processes. But now we have additional important projects in which this team is involved. So apart from the underwriting process, we also have projects spanning from customer support to collections to product recommendations to consumers, lead generation for the sales team. So we have several important initiatives that AI is the core element being invested. We are very optimistic by that. But we also at the same time we want to make sure that we don't just do the type of AI wash, right? Just call it AI because it's hype. I mean it's expensive, right? To do anything related to that. So it needs to be something that we can see the application, the return on investment in a relatively short amount of time, like 6 to 12 months from now. There needs to be something, right? It cannot be too forward looking, otherwise it doesn't make sense for a company in the stage that we are.
You secure a 25 million Series A led by Salesforce Ventures, which I understand was their first investment in Brazil. What was that funding process like, and how did you convince them to make that bet?
So we've raised our Series A, which was led by Salesforce Ventures, as you've mentioned. That was in 2022, which was also the year which some people called sort of the winter of startups, right? So before that, we had also raised other rounds in 2021. That was much easier in 2021 in terms of the scrutiny we got. Raising money on 2022 required a bit more time and some additional analysis. But at the end of the day, I mean, we were able to close at a very good round with very good conditions. I believe if the business is good, if the team is good, if the upside is clear, there will always be investors willing to put money on it, right? Regarding specifically Salesforce, which you've mentioned, it was, I think still is a great fit for Pagaleve. We were their first investment in Latin America. For them, that meant becoming involved with fintech in a hot and growing region such as Latam for fintechs, and also meant entering Brazil, right, and learning more about the business opportunities here in the country. I think that was important for them. For us, it also made a lot of sense. Salesforce is, of course, very close to a large amount of retailers and potential partners as well. So they also have great subject matter expertise in subjects that are of interest of Pagaleve, such as AI, right? So it was a good combination of needs, both from Salesforce and from Pagaleve.
Looking back, what do you think was the most compelling aspect of your speech that ultimately convinced Salesforce to invest?
I mean, I think it's about the opportunity that what we are building, right? I mean, back then we were starting the business. When we started pitching for Series A, that was February or March 2022. We were operating for only 6 months, actually. So it was not the results that we got only because the operation was in the beginning, but much more on how we saw the future, right? What we were doing. I think that was important. The team that we had put together until then was, I think it was also very important. I think, at the end of the day, in this level of a company, they invest in the team, the founders, but also in the initial team. And there was a timing component as well, right? I mean, we are beyond having a great team and a great idea. We were also in a good timing. Like Pix was picking up. We had a great product. We had, we are very well positioned. So I think those are some of the elements that made a difference for them, I believe.
When did you know that you had like product market fit? Were there any surprising use cases or customer segments that emerged that you didn't anticipate?
I believe that since the beginning, we had a pretty good idea on the potential product market fit for both retailers and consumers, right? We have two clients at the end of the day, right? Retailers and consumers. One good surprise that we had in terms of product market fit was on how much additional money we can enable retailers to make by offering Pagaleve. That was very important and very clear for us after some time we launched. In the beginning, it was not that clear. And that was, I think, one of the reasons why the growth on the retailer side first was so fast, right? Because it was a no-brainer for the retailer, right? If they tested Pagaleve for a month, they would make more money than without Pagaleve, right? There were no competitors that were as sophisticated as we were back then, right? So product market fit was relatively clear from the beginning, and it was reinforced as we progressed with the business.
How did your product strategy evolve once you start getting feedback from merchants, from consumers?
One interesting thing, Tony, we did was we decided to have our own internal customer support team, so we didn't outsource that. And one important thing that we did since the beginning was to have an established feedback loop from the customer support team to the leaders of each of the areas. So what we did since the beginning was to have a weekly meeting with all the support agents. Now we don't do because it's a lot of agents, but we have with all of the agents and all of the leaders, in which they would present to us a couple of slides with all the main topics, all the main things that came up on while they were talking to consumers and to retailers that were complaining or making suggestions or anything about the operation. That was very rich. Ensuring that we have this feedback loop was very important for us to launch a lot of new features. For example, we have a dashboard for retailers for Pagaleve, right? And there are a couple of features, a couple of different buttons you can click and stuff. So we got a lot of evolutions of that from ideas that came from agents that were talking to retailers and to consumers every day.
And talking about the product, you have developed these innovative features like co-payment for partial approvals and turbo approval for initial decline customers. Can you explain how these work and the impact that they have on conversion rates?
Yeah, of course. So for co-payment, the way it works is that we don't display the limit that the credit limit that each person have with Pagaleve, just because there's no pre-established limit. The way for us to give a limit for any its specific purchase is to calculate that in the time that the person requests for a specific purchase. So if you are doing a purchase of t-shirts, for example, we are going to calculate we're going to understand not only if we're going to approve you or not, but we also going to calculate if we approve you, what will be the limit for that specific purchase, right? So in case you request to buy something and the amount of this purchase is higher than the limit that the algorithm has calculated to you, instead of denying the person, we approve in case the person seems credit worthy, and the remaining amount that's passed above the limit, we include that in the first installment. The first installment in Pagaleve is always paid up front, right? So let's suppose a person wants to buy an item that costs 1.2 thousand reais, 1,200 reais. And let's suppose that the limit for that person is just 1,000 reais, 200 reais short than the item being purchased. So instead of denying the person, we take this 200 reais and put that into the first installment, right? So the first installment gets a little bit bigger, but then we are able to approve the person, and that reduces our risk profile a little bit, right? So that helps a lot. That makes everybody happy. And about the second point on the turbo approval. The turbo approval feature was launched around 1 year ago. And what happens is that we have an approval rate of around 70%, right? And that varies across retailers, products being purchased across sectors. So let's suppose we are operating in a retailer that has a 60% approval on average, like 60%. We come to this retailer and say that we can increase their approval rate from 60 to 70%. And the only thing that they need to do is to allow us to charge an additional fee only for consumers that would be denied in the first place. So those additional 10% of consumers, they would be denied on our conditions. But if I charge an additional fee for them, my risk appetite is increased, and therefore I can approve more people. So at the end of the day, there will be more people buying at that retailer, there will be more people approved, and everybody makes more money, right? So that was an example of additional feature that has a lot of value for the whole process.
And when you were starting getting results for these merchants, what sort of like validation helped you to build reputation across different merchants? And how do you scale from these 30 merchants that you have started, right, in 2021 to 7,000 or more than 7,000 merchants in Brazil?
Yeah, on the beginning, it was much tougher to sign contracts than it is today. I mean, the more we grow, the easier it is for us to show results from other retailers. And the most effective sales technique is to actually show real results from real customers, from real retailers, right? And in the beginning, this is much tougher. So I think in the beginning, that required much more time for us to mature the idea and to show how much additional money we can make to the retailer. And if you think on very large retailers, the more we advance with other large retailers, the more they get comfortable that this is not risky for them and that this can bring them additional money. So I don't think there's a single reason, a single answer on how to. It's just much more work in the beginning to get to big partners and big retailers, and as we prove results, I think this helps, right? But I think our approach has always been to be results oriented, right? To be real, to don't try to bullshit them because everybody's smart. I mean, people know about their business, so you need to be very, very candid on what you can and what you cannot do.
Talking about results, do you have a customer story that stands out to you? It could be from the merchants or the consumer side.
Yeah, sure. There's one on retailers. To understand that, I'm going to explain a little bit about competition first. We don't really pay too much attention to competition because it's a market that's so big and the traction is so huge that we prefer to focus our energy on growing, on understanding how we can be better and better, right? But there was one situation, I think it was one of the few situations in which a retailer churned from our platform and started to operate with a competitor for Pagaleve. And in this situation, this retailer spent 3 months with the competitor, didn't like it, and came back to Pagaleve, right? And I think we were very happy to have them back and not to be mad or anything. We're very happy because that actually proved that our product is superior. That we can at the end of the day make or add more value to that retailer. It was I think interesting story that was so fast, in which, I mean, one of the only situations in which we lost a customer to another competitor. It was very fast for them to realize that what we offered added more value to them.
What were the inflection points for Pagaleve that surprised you the most in terms of its impact on growth?
I mean, I don't think there was one specific inflection point. I think there was a combination of a lot of micro pivots in the business and new features and small new features that were like little by little adding to the robustness of the business, right? So there's no aha moment, no like silver bullet, but a lot of work in the day to day to perfect the product and to make it really, really strong. So I think key for us was to make sure that we have a very empowered product and technology team that could work hand in hand with the business areas to understand what would have the likelihood of impacting the business the most, and for this product and technology team to have the resources to work fast and furious and deliver those improvements every single week. So I think that was the key thing, but not a specific inflection point.
Now that you have dominated e-commerce, I understand that you're testing payments in physical stores with about like 2,000 locations. What unique challenges does each channel present compared to e-commerce?
Tony, when we started testing physical stores, and I say testing because our focus has been much more on e-commerce, right? So we've started piloting physical stores since the beginning, right? So we have always done something small on physical stores. Now we are improving that. We're increasing that. The first challenge that we saw in physical stores was that Pagaleve has an approval process, or any installment solutions has an approval process, which means that some people will get approved and some people will get rejected, right? When you are a salesperson at a store, so let's suppose you work in an apparel store and you sell t-shirts. It's hard to sell, right? If you're a salesperson. When you have a customer that wants to buy something and then you take the item, goes to the cashier with the customer, you don't want to offer a payment method that has the likelihood or some likelihood of the person being denied, right? Because that can mean that you as a salesperson are going to lose your commission, right? So on the beginning, the challenge that we had was that some sales reps from the store, not from us, from the store, were reticent on offering Pagaleve as a payment method because there was a chance, even though it's a small chance, but there was a chance of the consumer being denied. So that was a very good insight for us. So what we did was we changed the logic of the product for the physical stores and did it in a way that we could do a pre-approval of the person. In Brazil, most of the stores, they ask for the person's ID number. It's called the CPF. It's the Brazilian ID number before starting anything, right? Because in some cities, there are some credit incentives. So it's a normal process to ask for a person's ID number before starting with this payment process. So what we did is that we created a process in which we can pre-analyze the person without the need to tell that we're going to approve or deny them. And then if there is a pre-approval, then this is going to pop up in the screen for the sales rep, and the sales rep can offer Pagaleve as a payment method, right? So this helps a lot in the psychology of the sales rep, because they know that they're not gonna have the risk of the person being denied, and so this helps in the whole process. But this is just one of the examples. I mean, it's a much heavier operation in terms of costs. I mean, because in several models you need to have a physical, like a person there to support the process. You don't actually need, but in some models it helps. So right now we have several initiatives being tested. It's still a test, right? I mean, we still can call an MVP. So we have around four methodologies or different initiatives in physical stores being MVP'd, so that we know in a few months what we actually want to like pump the gas and invest further.
What do you think was the main challenges to adapt one model from another? And then what sort of results or incentive merchants from physical stores have have that differentiate from e-commerce?
I mean, the type of results they get is very similar. So the objective for them on adding Pagaleve, a solution like Pagaleve, is to make more money. You should make more sales right at the end of the month. So it's the same value proposition. It doesn't matter if they are physical retailer, if they are on e-commerce. What changes is the way to deliver this, right? And so the methodology on how you actually make it happen and how you actually deliver. So I think it's important to have a lot of experimentation and know we have a very seamless product online and e-commerce. As I mentioned to you, it's faster and easier to buy with Pagaleve online than it is to buy with a credit card, right? That's huge. And we want to have this kind of a similar aspect when we think about physical stores. There are a couple of tailwinds that might help with us on that. One of them is some of the central banks' efforts on ITP and on open finance. There's one feature being ramped up now, which is the tap and go for PEX. It's still nascent. It's still not fully out there yet, but for sure something that we will take advantage of, and we use this to make sure that we also have a product that is as seamless as our online solution.
So regarding you as a leader, when things get tough in a startup, what is your playbook for managing through crisis? Can you share a specific crisis moment at Pagaleve and how you led it through it?
I think it's not if a crisis happens. Crisis will happen. The first thing is I think you need to have a very good relationship. You need to be very open with your team, especially your direct team, the leadership group for Pagaleve, because people will look up to me and to them when shit happens, and everybody needs to feel that whatever is being told is for real, right? It's not bullshit. And people can smell like bullshit, right? So you need to be real, right? For your team, of course, you need to adapt the message. You need to have a communication strategy that's important, but you need to be real, and people need to feel that you are real with them. I think that's first commandment of crisis management. And then, of course, you need process, right? I mean, you need to make sure that you have a good process. I mean, you need the right forums to be able to take decisions. And I think the third one is that you need to ask for help. So we constantly ask for help from our investors, from people that we know in the market. I think we cannot be afraid of asking for support, for asking for help to anyone that we might believe that could add something, right? I think those are the three important things. One example, Tony, it's not from Pagaleve, it's from my time at Oyo. So at Oyo, we had an operation of 1.2 thousand employees. We had 600 buildings. It was the largest hotel chain in Brazil, and we were growing like crazy, both in terms of volume and also in profitability. And then COVID hit, right? And it was very, very tough. So we were sitting in our homes. We couldn't go to the office. And revenues went almost close to zero. Revenues were like a very sharp decrease. It was a very clear crisis mode. Like what we do, nobody knew when COVID was going to end, and we need every month we had to pay employees their salaries and stuff. So navigating those times for me, I think it was very clear on the need to have the leadership group very close, very, very synchronized, to make sure that we take risks and we take decisions that we don't know the exact outcome, but that we are very aligned on how we do that. I think my most difficult day in my life, in my professional life, was during that period. So it was a day in which I had to personally fire 500 people at the same time by Zoom. That was very tough, brutal, but I think we tried to do the most humane way possible. And I think at the end of the day, people understood the circumstances. I think there was a good level of understanding, but just because we were so open about the situation and so open about what were our trade-offs, right? And we explained that to everyone.
Let's talk a little bit more about the market. I think the buy now, pay later sector globally has faced some headwinds with rising interest rates and changing investor sentiment. Like, how this affect the buy now, pay later landscape in Brazil specifically, and how has Pagaleve navigated these changes?
I mean, the global buy now, pay later sector, I mean, there was a valley, after COVID, in which, for example, Klarna dipped its valuation, but that was sort of a momentary thing. Overall, buy now, pay later is doing great everywhere, pretty much most of the countries. Klarna is about to do a nice IPO. Zip is doing great. The companies overall are doing very good. It was pretty much a glitch, from a momentary thing. If you compare their positions in 2020 to the positions they are today, all of them are way, way higher than they were. 2021 doesn't count, right? Because this was an artificial overvaluation of everything. But right now, the sentiment is very good, right? Globally and also in Brazil, we've seen companies thriving. We saw a lot of companies shutting down or being purchased globally, and that was also good because I mean the only actually the stronger companies remained. But I see the sector globally as strong as it can be, and still with a lot of room for further growth.
Morgan Stanley published in 2023 a study showing that Pagaleve was the fastest growing company in online acceptance payments in Brazil. What do you attribute this remarkable growth rate to?
Yeah, so there was also a 2024 study by also Morgan Stanley. They repeated that study. It's still same message. We are the biggest buy now pay later company in Brazil in terms of acceptance, meaning in terms of amount of retailers that offer our solution. One of the responsibles for that is of course the team, the commercial team that goes and sells and presents Pagaleve. But at the end of the day, what matters most is that we add significant values for retailers. I mean, so even if we had an amazing team and the product was not as good, this wouldn't fly, right? So at the end of the day, what matters is that we deliver good results for retailers. They make more money with us than without us, and that's actually what makes them sign with Pagaleve. So that we have the next additional retailer sign with us and offering Pagaleve in their checkouts.
3 months ago, Pagaleve's LinkedIn company account published that you guys have reached 1 billion reais in payment volume. What was your immediate reaction, and what do you expect to grow from that point to the future?
Yeah, milestones like this are nice, are interesting for us to boost morale. It doesn't mean anything at the end of the day, but it's nice for us to see what the steps along the way. We are almost getting to 2 billion already, and it's been only a couple of months. So the speed that we are growing is intense. Just for you to have an idea, we are closing now March, right? We are almost in the end of March, and if you compare March this year with March that year, with the forecast on what we're going to actually close March, it's an 8x versus March. So March over March, 8x. So we are really, really excited with the level of growth that we have been having, and with healthy margins, with good profitability. One interesting thing is that we have also reached positive EBITDA for the first time in December. Not only growing a lot on volume, but also growing a lot in profitability.
Let's look to the future. Where do you see Pagaleve in 3 or 5 years? What is your vision for the company's evolution?
So the vision, Tony, for Pagaleve is to become synonym of installments for all of the Brazilians, right? Today, if you ask around for Brazilians, if they think on installments, what brand do they come to their mind? There's no actually company that has conquered that space. So we want to conquer that in the minds of people. So whenever they think on installments, immediately they think about Pagaleve. So that's the long-term vision. In terms of steps to get there, I mean, the most natural thing for us is to continue to increase our presence in key retailers. We are already within several very large and very important retailers in Brazil. We want to continue that path and become ubiquitous in the e-commerce. That's what I think the first one. And then after that, I mean, ensure that we continue to add additional features and additional product for both consumers and retailers.
What is the biggest challenge that you anticipate in realizing that vision?
I think the challenge is mostly on execution. I don't see any huge risk that could have to be really dangerous for us. I think we are very conservative, like on regulations, on everything we do that could be more delicate. So we have a conservative approach to things such as regulation, which I think is important. So I think most important thing for me, I think, is to make sure that we execute well, right? That we don't go into the temptation of doing too many things at once, so that we choose a small set of very impactful things that we want to do and execute them really, really well. So the process of executing them and constantly prioritizing, I think it's one of the biggest challenges that we have. Because, for example, right now in our latest planning session, we have around 30 new initiatives that can be done. But if you choose to do the 30 initiatives, then we are screwed, right? Because we're not going to do them very well. So instead, we are choosing 3, 4, 5 initiatives in which we're going to go really hard, really deep, and implement them very well. So that's it's easier said than done. So the process of prioritizing is essential for a company to thrive and to be able to do things well, like to deliver things well.
As Pix is expanding to other markets like Portugal, like Uruguay, and other Latin American countries, do you see Pagaleve expanding outside Brazil, or you guys are laser focused in the Brazilian market and you don't see yourself outside Brazil any future?
I mean, there is opportunity for sure in other countries, and we have the structure, right? So, for example, we have APIs built with the 30 biggest e-commerce platforms in Brazil, right? And most of those platforms operate in several different countries. We have our systems in place, and they can operate not only in Pix, but they can operate with other payment methods. But the opportunity in Brazil is so huge, Tony, is so big that for the moment, like now in the short to medium term, we don't intend to expand yet, just because we can make a multi-billion-dollar company only in Brazil. Don't get me wrong, we even have the domain names like pagaleve.com.ar for Argentina, pagaleve.com.mx for Mexico. For all countries in Latin America, or for most companies, we already have the domain names registered. But it's not for right now. I mean, there's a lot to do, and it's the same thing of the previous answer. Like we want to prioritize. We don't want to spread ourselves too thin. I want to make sure that we go bold on what we are proposing to do. That's a very important thing for us.
So, if you were to make one bold prediction about the future of financial services in emerging markets that most people will disagree with today, what would it be?
That's a good question. I think the central bank will continue its job, and it's been doing a good job in the last few years on fostering competition, on giving space to fintechs, and on creating regulations that allow for new initiatives and new companies to arise. I believe this will continue to be the case, and this will still be important for the rise of new companies like that are going to be born in the years to come. I think that will continue to happen. I don't think people disagree with that. I think this is a point that gets reinforced. So this is, I think, the main thing I can think of in terms of trend for the fintech sector in Brazil.
So regarding you as entrepreneur and your experience operating in Brazil, what is the best piece of advice that you have received?
So one advice was it's a little bit on what I mentioned about Uber, but I heard that a lot on really try to reach for the stars, right? I mean, the ambition needs to be really, really big. I mean, you don't want to do something for one city. You want to do for the country, for the world, right? I think be very bold and be very ambitious on what you're gonna get. I think for sure it's something that it's very important. Second one is on the importance of having a great culture and invest time and resources on ensuring a good culture. And I think third one is on having the top leadership team. I mean, the initial employees with skin in the game, right? I mean, they need to have a good amount of equity, and they need to feel the same type of excitement that you are feeling, and just because they can have this good upside from when the business grows, right? I think those are three that I can remember that I think make a lot of sense.
From your experience working in consulting, operations at Coca-Cola, high-growing companies like Oyo and Uber, and now funding and leading Pagaleve, what is the most important traits to hire A players? What do you see in a person that helps you understand that they will become an A player in your company, in your startup?
Good question. First trait that comes to my mind immediately is an energy level. I mean, you need to feel that the person has a lot of energy here, and that the person is not a 9 to 6 person, right? It needs to be a person that's committed, that's full of energy, and wants to deploy. You like when you start to ask questions in an interview process, or when you bring a person to have lunch. I think actually those things are good, right? So instead of only doing interviews, especially key roles, you need to feel the person more, like having lunch. Take a coffee together, visit the office. Things like that. You need to feel that the energy level is there. Like the person is really, really full of energy and wanting to deploy that energy. That's the first one. Second one, the person cannot be an asshole, right? So you want to be, apart from the values and from the company, you want to have someone that's a nice person that's gonna get along well with the people from your team, right? I mean, there needs to be this bond, this thing, because you're gonna work long hours. You're gonna disagree a lot. because it's part of the game. So having someone that has too much ego or is too much difficult to deal with, for sure that you need to try and understand if the person is and the third one, the person needs to have a very good analytical and strategic skills, right? I mean, this I got a lot from McKinsey on doing like case interviews. I don't do case interviews all the time, but I mean, that try to grasp the analytical side. At the end of the day, especially leaders, I mean, each leader needs to be also a kind of to have kind of strategic hat that understands about the whole business, not only their area. And it needs to be very good on translating what's going on into clear decision points, into clear topics for discussion. And it needs to be fast, right? I mean, the analytical part needs to be there. I mean, the sharpness of thought is a very important aspect.
What keeps you up at night as a CEO?
I'm gonna tell what doesn't keep up at night. I think I don't any like threats or fears of things happening. This does not keep you up. I think maybe in the beginning it kept. Today, I think the most important things that actually keep up at night, that I wake up and remember something and write down in my cell phone to remember later, is on things for us to grow faster or to do things better, right? I mean, I unfortunately, I wake up a lot at night and with ideas and stuff. And my methodology for not freaking out is to write down. When I write down, I can go back to sleep. But I think ideas on how to get the next big partner, how to do that specific process better, how to launch a new feature for Pagaleve. This type of things, like ideas on how to grow more or be better, are things that normally pop out in my head at night.
Done is better than perfect. Would you agree?
Yeah, to a certain extent, right? I mean, not only done, I don't think so, but done with a certain level of quality for sure, right? I mean, we don't need to launch perfect things. It's a waste of time. It needs to be launched. Launching is important, but I think you need to have some thresholds.
Is it important speed of execution, even though that it could affect quality over time, or is your ability to get faster feedback and close that loop in order to make iterations and improve? Like, what is better, to actually move slow and calculate it, or move fast and iterate faster?
I lean much more towards the second one, on move faster and test. But it's what I said, that there needs to be a certain quality threshold. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time. If you release something that's too sketchy, like too sketchy and too low quality, it's worthless. Because I mean, there will be so many things that you're gonna do. You're not gonna actually know if the feature is good or not, because it was so sketchy. So there needs to be a balance, and you need to feel it in the days. You also need people in your team that also have this perception of what's the minimum level of quality that you need to be able to have a good test, right? But definitely much more leaning towards trying to move fast and analyze as we go.
Final question: what advice would you give to entrepreneurs looking to build fintech solutions for emerging markets?
I think one is like, try and talk to a lot of people. I mean, you don't try to just read articles and find out in your house. I mean, you need to go out there, like, and talk to leaders from companies, from fintech, from banks, from anywhere. People will respond to you. Like, most cases, when I reach out to people, they respond. It's counterintuitive, because you think people are going to not want to talk. If you ask people out for coffee to hear, they will. Most of cases, some cases not, but in most cases they will agree. I mean, spend a significant amount of time researching and talking to people, not only reading, but also talking to people. I think that's one. Second one, give enough energy to understanding the regulations and the risks. Fintech and financial services as a whole is a very regulated sector, so you don't want to be caught off guard or unprepared. So you need to make sure that you're conservative in terms of regulation and just abiding by the law, like understanding what the laws are. So don't save money on lawyers. Like, have a good lawyer, have a good support on when you build your thesis, right? And I think the third one is when I mentioned about talent, right? I mean, you want to have great partners, right? Great co-founder, great first hires. Don't settle with just who is excited to do with you, but maybe is not the best person. Go bolder, go ambitious, and try that person that is very happy in the company that he or she works, but that you might try to convince that person, because you might be surprised that you could take someone out of top companies to your unexistent business yet, just because the idea is so nice, and that's just because there's a clear opportunity ahead. I think those are the three advices I would give to someone thinking about launching a fintech.
Thank you so much, Henrique, for your time. It was a nice conversation, and it was very inspiring as well.
Thanks, Tony, for the invite. It was great to be here.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and hit the like button if you want to get more episodes about fintech in emerging markets.